Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Do we have any crypto or blockchain fans listening? Or do we have people listening that are tuning in to obtain a better understanding of the world of blockchain, crypto, and DeFi? And a big shout out to Sam L. I won't reveal his username, I won't reveal his full name, who listens to the show. Sam has a love-hate relationship with crypto investing, he was telling me. When it's sky high, he's the happiest man in the world, but when it dips or corrects, he gets very worried. He gets very worried. He gets very concerned. Equally, he won't go back to a 2% interest savings rate either. So thanks for your email, Sam. You know who you are. It's always a pleasure to get a message from a listener. My best advice to you, though, is stop refreshing CoinMarketCap. Zoom out and look at the monthly picture. Things never look that bad then. But enough of my crypto counselling. I'm not here to talk about that side of things, but more about the tech and the companies that are building the infrastructure of tomorrow. And BlockDemon is a blockchain deployment facilitator. What Heroku does for the cloud, they essentially do for blockchain networks. Easy one-click deployment, management and supervision of nodes, no matter in what configuration. And their solution is fully portable, allowing you to switch networks and change all within the click of a button, so you don't have to worry about picking the perfect network configuration from day one. And anyone that's worked in IT or networks will know about that pain point all too well. Now, they also support the blockchain developer ecosystem with best-of-breed DevOps advice. But what about the story behind the company? Where are they now? Where are they heading to? These are just some of the topics of today's conversation. So buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to Berkeley, California, so we can speak today with Konstantin Richter, CEO and founder of BlockDemon. Welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah, of course. I'm Konstantin Richter. I'm the CEO and founder of BlockDemon, and I spend my days trying to connect institutions and individuals to blockchains. And I live in Berkeley, California, but I was made in Germany and actually went to school in England for a little while. So immigrant over here in the US and happily trying to bring on the decentralized ledger revolution.
I love that. And I got a feeling there's got to be a story behind that somehow, because as someone that's got a background as a software developer and an entrepreneur, and you're doing a lot of travel, of course, I'm curious, what is the story behind you entering the world of crypto and blockchain?
Yeah, it's a good question. I was raised back in the day when Europe was still open and people valued, for example, speaking a lot of languages. So I went to 4 different universities in 4 different countries. Back in the day, people thought the more languages you speak, the better, which turned out to be a myth because everyone just speaks English. So I wasted a lot of time learning Italian and French besides German. But and then I started in telecommunication networks, so building networks, mobile networks, and so really passionate about getting people who, have simple mobile phone devices, for example, at the time, content. And so I think that's really where my interest in network technology started. And I had a couple of interesting people I met on the way. One of them was a gentleman called Nikesh Arora, who at the time worked at T-Mobile International, and he drove the expansion of T-Mobile's internet technology business. And so I joined him there. I only mention him because he later became famous, the sort of leading chief, commercial officer at Google. He joined Google, I think, in 2004, and he left a few years ago, but he was, by far the most influential commercial person there. And I know why. He was a very demanding and intelligent man to work with. But that's how I got started. I then worked at Nokia as well at the time in 2005, 2006, 2007. It made a lot of sense. I remember talking to people if I should work with Nokia or Apple. And, at the time people were like, oh yeah, Nokia. I mean, obviously. It's interesting how that has changed. There was a funny meme on Twitter about stock options for Nokia and Apple. If I would have joined, Apple now is valued at a couple of trillions.
Yeah.
And Nokia's valued, I think, at like 10 billion or something, which is pretty much, they own half of Finland, which is just that, and so, but anyway, but it was exciting times. And I left Nokia being a little I just never was a great employee. I always liked to think about strategy and to execute. And I just never really I never felt satisfied or that I achieved something. I always hit a lot of ceilings. I remember at Nokia trying to deal with, doing M&A and innovation deals, partnership. I remember wanting to do a partnership with Spotify, and I just couldn't get these things through the boards and approval processes and gatings. And, when you work in software at the time, those were clearly the right things to do. And it's so frustrating when you kind of just sort of hit these walls and can't get things done. So I decided to become an entrepreneur, and I met a very influential person in the music business and started to work on a transcoding tech company that allowed musicians to upload a song, into the cloud, and there it got transcoded into metadata and audio clips that could be shared directly to Spotify, Rhapsody, Pandora, and of other at the time available streaming platforms. So that's how I got my start. And that business did do okay, not great, but I learned a lot about cap tables and funding at the time. I then met another entrepreneur, and we worked together on a company called Lookbooks, which was a photo management systems. And that was acquired in 2014. And then, and thus it went, and so I kind of started to get comfortable with the process of building companies and roadmaps alongside a set of ambitious investors. And so I knew the milestones, the way to talk to, the way to attract capital at cheap rates in order to build businesses that were leaps of faith, really. And so I became aware of blockchain in 2015 when, I owned some Bitcoin, and I started advising and coaching another CEO at the time at a blockchain company, and blockchain was starting to get popular at that time. And so that's kind of where I saw what blockchain was about. I was still, building out companies and trying to exit them at the time, but I got more and more excited about being a full-time entrepreneur again. And so when I was a free agent in 2017, after the last company I was with, we sold, it was really a no-brainer for me. And initially that was the ICO token craziness that I'm sure you've heard of in 2017. That was, mind-blowingly overhyped. And I was working on a project that actually had very good intentions in setting up a token. And I remember working with folks trying to get an Ethereum node up and running for an extended period of time. And it just was so hard to do. And so the difficulty of that and the heightened expectation of what blockchain networks could do showed me a clear delta, right? Like the technical inefficiency and the exuberant expectation translated into opportunity. And at the time, as you know how it goes, right? Like I had a recent exit, so I had capital at my disposal. The moment was right. I was able to start a company and spend time with it and put some money down and get it going long enough until I found my first large institutional investor. And, we haven't looked back ever since.
Love that. And 2017 was a crazy year. But did you notice how all the self-proclaimed experts and influencers all disappeared pretty much after that, didn't they? But I have noticed they've started to come back. So I don't know if we're heading for a similar kind of ball.
I mean, I'm sure. I mean, well, it's just I think one of the things that people forget is that blockchain is a software technology. And software technologies evolve and progress over time. I mean, the core developers working on these protocols have consistently worked on them. The influx of people in 2017 were hustlers trying to make money, not people contributing meaningfully to any of these protocols. And so what I mean is like every year, 2018, 2019, 2020, a lot was technologically accomplished to bring blockchains a lot closer to the promise that triggered the exuberance of 2017. And so I think what you see now is a much more natural and appropriate bull run, I'm air quoting, which is based on the technology these days is vastly superior than it was in 2017. So you're much closer to actually offering solutions that can connect to traditional institutions, can connect to the actual financial systems and markets in a manner that's scalable. And so we moved on quite a lot. And so I feel the current bull run is actually based mostly on professional institutions joining the cryptocurrency trend. And that was not something that happened in 2017 at all. 2017 was a pure speculative bubble. And this time around, it's actually, large banks buying Bitcoin and things like that.
100% agree with you on that. And here in 2020, we will have people listening and hearing about BlockDemon for the very first time. So I've got to ask, for those people, what is it? What problems are you solving with this technology? And what makes you different from other blockchain infrastructure providers out there on the market?
Yeah, great question. So when we say we're an infrastructure provider, we think of ourselves as bringing sort of cloud formation tooling to the blockchain space. So allowing institutional grade and engineers who are trying to connect to blockchains, to trade them, to facilitate payments with them, to build applications on top of, you need to have a node is the purest connection to a blockchain. It's an actual copy of the ledger and the software that actually participates in the consensus of the network, meaning you're buying your seat at the congressional table of a protocol with the node. And in order to really have a commercial business on top of a network with any liabilities and insurance and thus things, you want to avoid having middlemen. You don't want to connect to a node that someone else operates who has a different commercial interest. And so you should really run your own nodes, and that's where we come in. So we provide tooling to allow institutions to deploy and manage their nodes that are exclusively theirs. And then they can build tooling on top of it. But what we're abstracting away is the nonlinear open source insanity of these protocols, which is they don't adhere to normal, software protocol, which is, we communicate updates to the core software early and in advance, and it's all well documented. That's not how these open source communities operate. Things happen ad hoc. It's a wild mix of people with different interests. And so you never know, what new technology gets approved to be put onto the protocol. And so you have to really be fairly deep in the respective protocols like Bitcoin and Ethereum, just as an example, in order to ensure that your node and operating system that connects you to that chain is up all the time. And so what companies pay us for is really not the deployment and one-time connection to a node, is they pay us that the node is always connected the right way. And so, because the scenario and damage potentially would be, imagine you're on exchange and there's a huge run on, some event occurs and everyone is buying Ethereum or selling Ethereum, and your node goes down and suddenly your users for half a day can't participate in that market movement, for example. That would be disastrous for an exchange. And so that's sort of what they pay us for, to abstract and take that type of complexity away from them. And so that's really what we solve. We streamline blockchain operations for institutions so they don't have to worry about any of the mayhem that I experienced when I first started BlockDemon.
And I think it's also worth highlighting that you guys are a trusted infrastructure partner to major institutions such as Shell and Comcast Ventures, and BlockDemon also specializes in blockchain infrastructure for industry heavyweights such as Polkadot, the Lightning Network, and Ethereum 2.0. But can I ask that you share a use case just to bring all that to life, and maybe something, especially something like BlockDemon's work with universities and research institutions, because I know you're having a lot of success there, aren't you?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we work with all sorts of large institutions and companies like Shell. That is a very simple use case and exploration of a permission network for a particular internal company process. And really what people are experimenting with is, can we onboard external parties to our core software frameworks more easily than we've been able to in the past? And so mostly those are ERP, SAP type of systems. And so the question is, can you take blockchains and their incorruptible nature to have trusted parties share data that, kind of streamlines, for example, a procurement process? And I think there's still a question mark there if blockchains are suitable for that. But on the larger scale, like the Libra type or DM type networks who we work with as well, they're really around facilitating payments within applications that a lot of people use, like Facebook Messenger, or one project we really, really like is called Mobile Coin, that facilitates payments within the Signal, the only truly encrypted messaging service application. And so it's really bringing these payment and money transfer solutions to the market delivering the promise of blockchain in a regulatory adequate manner, right? And so that's really the core use case for us. And so facilitating these networks, some of them you mentioned, obviously, Libra, things like Cielo or MobileCoin, those are pure phone-centric payment systems that actually take me back to my mobile phone days, that allows people very simply to send money from one device to another, ideally around the world, and so that's actually fairly revolutionary if you know anything about our current financial systems. And the question and challenge obviously are huge around regulatory issues here, but the promise and effectiveness to the main street user are enormous. The amount of money, and everyone who has a bank account knows this, we spend a lot of money on fees and things, and so blockchain brings a lot of solutions there. So we also run nodes for folks like Wharton, for example. Wharton is, probably the leading financial graduate school in the world, and they run nodes with us, and we also provide a lot of data because students are trying to research things like what's the total volume of Bitcoin spent, how much of the total supply of Bitcoin is held in wallets that hold more than $1 million of Bitcoin. Like, I'm just throwing out a little, so certain data sets that, for example, students like to study with. And the way to extract these data is, again, this data always comes out of nodes that contains a ledger of every transaction. And so let's say they get it fresh from the source with a system. And so we work a lot with research institutions. Frankfurt School in Europe is another one. And, I could go on and on. It's a major component of us. We believe that academia needs to play a very, very important part in the governance of these networks. So we do not just have speculators running point on really, managing these networks. And so we're very committed to bringing new stakeholders onto these networks, and academia is a great starting point.
And like you mentioned a few moments ago, institutional adoption of distributed ledger technology is a big talking point now. And it's a great thing to see in 2020 compared to what we were seeing 3 years ago. But I've got to ask, what are the pros and cons of institutions entering the sector? And how can we bring institutions into crypto the right way? Because I think we've all seen what happens if you do it the wrong way. But what is the best way forward here?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there's different trains of thoughts here. Yeah. There's the sort of extreme libertarian view of like, let's kill all the legacy institutions and build a whole new system. I'm of the view that the most efficient benefit of crypto will be brought to most of the people if we can work alongside governments and financial institutions. And so we got to meet them halfway. And for us, that translated into, for example, getting the right security certification and external audits in place that these governments and institutions can trust us in a commercially viable manner. So going after ISO compliance, for example, which is a security standard around software implementations, really, that is, kind of one of the things that enterprises look for when they select a software vendor. So, trying to match certain components of the traditional procurement cycle for these entities has been really important to us. And so that we can actually safely and easily connect to their systems and onboard more users onto blockchain. So our goal is to transfer users from legacy systems onto crypto systems, not to destroy legacy systems. And so I think it's also going to be an interesting progression over time. But I think the biggest jump would be to ensure that specifically outside of all the regulatory stuff, that the technological security and performance is externally audited and observed so institutions can safely interact with chains.
And there is a feeling in the industry that crypto is almost a social movement, and the original ethos of crypto is a democratically controlled currency. But how can you preserve that ethos moving forward, do you think?
Well, the fun thing is that with the larger networks, it's systemic, and so the Bitcoin has all the components, like, no one will ever be able to own Bitcoin. And so the trick is to build these systems so that they can operate by themselves and have systemic software at its core that makes sure that different stakeholders can't, steal or jeopardize the system. And so it's kind of building a little bit like, in a weird way, it's a sort of, it's like an AI system run by, it's a collection of minds that participates in these networks. And so the truest form of participation and participating in the evolution and preserving some of the ethos is to run a node. Nodes secure the network. They contain true copies of every transaction. They validate transactions. They put transactions in blogs. And so, which is why, we focused on node operation, because we feel that's the only way you can ensure that these networks scale, are efficient technologically and also safe. So, run a node. If you're passionate about ensuring that, I think, governments and financial institutions aren't the sole harbinger of financial goodwill, then, spin up a node and participate in these networks. I think it's an absolute vital component to our current financial infrastructure,
And one phrase that's been unavoidable this year, of course, has been DeFi. So can you tell the listeners a little bit more about the rise of DeFi in 2020 and what you think the future holds for the rapidly growing DeFi economy? Because obviously there will be some people listening that will know all about it, but there'll be some that are kind of sat on the outside wanting to know more, but probably afraid to ask.
Yeah, sure. I mean, DeFi is really decentralized finance. And I think the main thing is it's very often derivative tools and over-the-air exchanges of the value. So that can be a lot of different things. And so, for example, DeFi would be lending a Bitcoin to another blockchain network so that they have liquidity when people want to liquidate native tokens of a network. So I would say that DeFi is the foreign exchange market of the crypto world. What we experience in foreign exchanges in the real financial world, DeFi does by connecting these individual protocols on top of each other using different value propositions that already exist in the Bitcoin cryptocurrency markets. And so we've seen more and more derivative products, like, for example, taking something like Bitcoin, wrapping it, and allowing people to, put Bitcoin as a lending instrument onto other network protocols. And the yields and liquidity can be rather quick and large. And that obviously inspires people who find the inspiration in, premises like that, which are very similar to the 2017, I think, premises. And so it makes the news. When people hear, somebody made 100x on a simple investment very quickly, that can happen in these type of DeFi derivative products, like it could in the 1980s with a certain whatever complex bond structures Salomon Brothers did. And so it attracts a lot of attention, but it's actually on the stage of blockchain and then on the larger stage of finance, relatively meaningless in terms of numbers, but it inspires a lot of people. And so it drives a fair amount of innovation and new participants to come into the market and learn about it, which is a good thing. I think the downside is that it again drives focus on, returns that aren't really backed by any foundational performance or work of these individual networks. And so it's a good and bad, really.
It's funny how you mentioned the time in the 80s there, because I had forgotten about that. It reminds me of the old saying that history doesn't repeat itself, but it does often rhyme. And it's so true how the technology may change and the methods may change, but some of the practices do remain. But what about you guys in 2021? What's going to be your primary focus for BlockDemon?
Yeah, I think for us, besides really cementing our position as the leading infrastructure provider and node operator in the space, thus bringing more institutions to the fray. And so we're thinking a lot about how to ensure that transactions can be settled very quickly. Sometimes on Bitcoin, for example, if you transact on a Bitcoin, it can take an hour until a transaction actually finds its way on chain. And so there's now, I think, a lot of focus on infrastructure. The first layer that we're really a core component of is lifting the chains into existence, which is setting up the first 10, 100 nodes, 1,000 nodes, 10,000 nodes to ensure that these systems actually function on a technical level. The next level is, do they function on an economical, viable level? i.e., do they have the right settlement speed, the right liquidity to interact with existing financial institutions? So we're looking a lot at that. And in practice, for example, on infrastructure level, that might mean that we offer clusters of nodes with a load balancer that ensures that if you want to submit a transaction to the Ethereum network, we have nodes that are the closest to the respective node that actually validates and agrees to put the transaction onto the network. And so that you're first in line and that has a network speed component to it. So that's where we're going to go in 2021. It also shifts our business model a little more into the overall transaction volume market, because you can abstract fees of trades out of it. So that's something we're looking into, as well as lending out components, small parts of the tokens that we earn. We earn a lot of tokens because we power a lot of core infrastructure and get rewarded for it. And so, yeah, so we're investigating a lot of the layer 2 components at this point.
And for anyone listening that would like to continue the conversation we started or join your community, I'm sure you've got a passionate community out there on Telegram and Reddit, etc. Where's the best way to find all the information about BlockDemon?
I think actually Twitter probably is a good place to go. Just because the crypto community is probably the most outspoken on Twitter. Yeah. So you have, BlockDemon out there, BlockDemon.com. And so it's block like block and demon, either like the demon or the daemon. We got both. And so it doesn't matter what you type into your browser, but you'll end up on our website and you'll see that we have a marketplace which describes all the different blockchain protocols and their technical viability and ease of use to users, right? And so there's a lot of information on our site. There's a chat box, and, we're very actively in conversations with the community, and I'm always available as well. Twitter, again, is a good system there. Telegram, I have so many different Telegram channels. I have so many different messenger apps that it's impossible for us to keep track these days. So we try to be fairly committed to Twitter as well as our own website. So hello@blockdemon.com is a simple way to send us an email. My name is Konstantin, so Konstantin with a K, no E at the end, @blockdemon.com. You can always email me, and, love to hear your thoughts, and if you're interested in joining the fray.
It's great to see so much excitement and energy back in the blockchain industry at the moment, and especially because it feels that it's for all the right reasons now. And I also love there's an old Steve Jobs quote about you can't join up the dots looking forwards, you've got to do it looking backwards. And I do wonder if to look back at your time there at Nokia and your mobile devices and the choice between Nokia and Apple and everything, and now what you're doing and transforming payments between devices. It's funny how everything kind of happens for a reason and you're in that right place at the right time. But more than anything, just a big thank you for sharing your story with me today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me.
So much I loved about the conversation there. And as you know, although I'm a big tech guy, I love hearing about the guest background, especially Constantine's rich background as a software developer and entrepreneur, and how he came to enter the world of crypto and blockchain. Not to mention the origins of BlockDemon and how the company has evolved over the past 3 years and will continue to evolve over the next 3. And ultimately, what makes BlockDemon different from other blockchain infrastructure providers on the market? These are the kind of conversations and messages that can be difficult to find. So a big thank you to today's guest for taking the time to come on here, simplifying the message and talk about this complex technology in a language that everybody can understand. But if you do have any questions or you'd like to come on the podcast, or you've got your own insights that you'd like to share, simply send me a quick email. techblogwriter@outlook.com. My website is techblogwriter.co.uk, where you will find over 1,400 other interviews. But I have taken up far too much of your time already. So hopefully you will join me again tomorrow. If not, don't worry, I'm not going to take it personally. Just a big thank you for listening. And until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.